Good evening. I'm George Kilpatrick for the United Democrats of Onondaga County, and we're here tonight with City Court candidate Ann Magnarelli. Ann is a lawyer. She's a deputy county attorney, and she's got a tremendous background, which we'll get into. But as usual here at the United Democrats of Onondaga County, we invite you to ask your questions. So as we're going along, share this conversation with your friends if you're watching, and let them know that we're talking with Ann Magnarelli, a candidate for Syracuse CIty Court Judge, and we invite you to ask questions along the way about Ann. So Ann, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Looking at your background, we have something in common. I went to the Maxwell School in Syracuse, and so did you.
Yes.
And you're also a graduate.
Great program.
Didn't you love it?
I loved it, every second of it.
Yeah, you get to meet people from all over the world, and it's a great program. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you go to undergrad?
I went to SUNY Geneseo for my undergrad, and then I came back to Syracuse. I knew I wanted to come back here and raise my family here, so I attended Syracuse College of Law for my law degree, graduated in the top 10% of my class, magna cum laude, and at the same time, I got a master's in public administration from the Maxwell School.
JD-MPA. Yes.
That was a fabulous program, being able to get both of those degrees.
So what was your area of concentration?
Unfortunately, you couldn't concentrate when you were in the master's program. You just had to take, quantitative analysis, statistics, all those fun courses. I loved math. I actually went to undergrad thinking I was going to be a math major. So
did you really?
I did.
Wow.
Yes.
And so you grew up in Syracuse. Tell us where.
I grew up on the north side of Syracuse, and I still live on the north side, and raising my two kids. I have a daughter, Eloise, who's 8, and my son, Wesley, who's 4.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes. And I see from your background you have, so right now you are a deputy county attorney. Yes. So that's for Onondaga County.
Yes, it is.
And what are your duties involved there?
I really kind of am a jack of all trades over there right now. For a period of time, I was the parliamentarian for the county legislature, which meant I helped run the meetings and had to make rulings on different parliamentary issues. Right now, I'm also working in the family court department. So the Onondaga County represents the Department of Child and Family Services. So when there are abuse and neglect proceedings brought against parents that live in Onondaga County, we bring those proceedings. Onondaga County does, and we represent the county in family court on behalf of those children. And
your background, you've pretty much tapped into every level of government.
That is true.
So you worked at the city as assistant corporation counsel.
I did. I worked there for many years. And when you work for the city, as you can imagine, you're going to see a lot of different things. I worked all litigation. So I defended the city anytime it was involved in a lawsuit. So that could run from contract cases to claims against the police department or DPW workers. So it could be in federal court one day working on an excessive force case against a police officer, or I could be doing a negligence trip and fall case in Supreme Court.
And you clerked in federal court.
I did. I've been very honored. I've had really good experiences, and I've had on-the-job training for this position to be a city court judge. I've had not one but 2 clerkships. I clerked right out of law school. I was very honored. I got a clerkship with the New York State Appellate Division out in Albany, working for the appellate judges out there. And when you're working for an appellate court, you see every case. It's criminal, it's civil, it's family court. We got election law cases. So that was a great experience, exposed me to every kind of case you can imagine.
Go ahead.
And my second clerkship, I clerked for the federal court here locally in Syracuse. I did that for 2 years. I didn't work for any one particular judge. I worked for all the judges in the district court on habeas petitions. And not a lot of people know what those are. I honestly hadn't done a lot of work with those before.
Here's your chance to explain what they are.
They are all criminal cases, and it involves criminals who have gone through the New York State criminal justice system. They've been tried, they've been convicted and sentenced, and after that, they can appeal those convictions. After they've appealed everything through New York State, they can go on to federal court and say there was some kind of constitutional violation somewhere along the line. And I dealt exclusively with those cases. And that was a crash course in New York State criminal justice, criminal procedural law. It was wonderful.
And in addition to that, you spent some time in private practice. When did you have time?
Well, I like the variety, and it's been great.
Yeah, yes. You really did. Talking with Ann Magnarelli, candidate for Syracuse City Court Judge. And if you're watching us live on Monday night, October the 1st, we invite you to type in your question right there, and we'll get those questions answered for you. And you're also active in the Onondaga County Women's Bar Association.
Yeah, since I became a barred attorney, I've been a member of the Women's Bar Association here in Central New York, and I also was a member of the board of directors for many years. I was vice president for a time, secretary, director. I think it's a great organization. It helps get women attorneys. It's a great mentoring program to help women attorneys in our community. And they also do a lot of other things in the community. Pro bono work, for one thing. It's a great organization.
And I see you also did some time with the New York State Assembly.
I did. Well, after I graduated from undergraduate, I did work for the New York State Assembly Office of Program and Counsel on their education committee. I did that.
This was before law school?
This was before law school. I took some time off in between and worked. Honestly, I thought I was going to go back to law school and go back into government, into policy work. That was where I thought my passion and focus was going to be. I thought my law degree was going to be secondary to the master's. But then after I had that clerkship with the New York State Appellate Division, I just fell in love with the work. I saw how every single case can solve a problem. In every case, there's two sides to an issue, obviously. There's two parties. There is something that they're trying to work out. But in the end, you can help someone. And I saw that it could be immediate, that you could help someone. And in policy work, as we often know, it can take years and years to accomplish your goals. And, I thought this was a better way for me to help.
We're glad that you chose this path.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, Anna's running for Syracuse City Court Judge. Again, reminder, we want to get some views up here. So tell a friend. We're live on Facebook here on Monday night. All right, let's talk about, why are you running to be City Court Judge?
Absolutely. Well, I do believe that this is the best way that I can serve. I grew up in a family who was committed to public service. Whether we're talking about my father, who's Assemblyman Bill Magnarelli.
I was going to ask that question. I didn't want to assume. Okay.
Yes. And he's devoted his entire career to trying to serve this community and make it a better place. And my mother, Karen, she taught at Henniger High School for 30 plus years. So they instilled in all of us, me, my brother, and my sister, to give back to the community. And this is one way that I think I can do it. And specifically with City Court. I'm running for City Court Judge because I think it has a huge impact on the people that live in this community. It is a high volume court. It sees a lot of people on a daily basis. But the cases that they deal with specifically affect the residents of this city. And it's not the big multi-million-dollar lawsuits. It's not the big felony cases. Those go over to county court.
Everyday quality of life.
It is everyday quality of life issues, whether we're talking about landlord-tenant, small claims. They handle all the misdemeanors within the city. So it really has a big impact, and I'd love to be a part of that. And I think, in this day and age, the times we're living in right now, we need justices and judges who have the experience, can be fair, and have the judgment necessary to do that job. And I think I have that. I've built a good reputation in the legal community, and I think I have these qualities.
You said, one of the things you said to me is that there's so many different courts within City Court. Talk to me about some of the different courts that people may not be aware of, because there are specialties.
There are. I think a lot of people don't know what City Court does, which is interesting because sometimes it's the only court that most people in the city will ever go in. If you get a traffic ticket, you're going to City Court. If you have a small claims dispute, those are disputes that are under a certain value, small monetary value. If you have a dispute with a contractor who didn't finish a job, that you would go to small claims court. If you're a landlord and you're trying to evict your tenant, you go to landlord-tenant court over at City Court. If there's a code violation issue with your home, the city of Syracuse may issue you a violation notice, and you'll end up in city court for that. And then that's all the civil side. And then on the criminal side of it, anyone that's arrested within the city of Syracuse is brought through city court to have their bail set. That is a huge job of what city court does. They set bail for everyone arrested in the city. And then anything that's a misdemeanor stays in city court. If it's a felony, it moves on to county court.
And you also, there's also domestic violence court?
Yes, there are some specialized courts. There is a drug court. Right now, Judge Cecil runs that court. There are certain criteria in order to get into that court, but it's low-level, nonviolent drug offenses, generally speaking, can get diverted to drug court. So instead of incarcerating a person, there are other options available to try and get to the root of the problem, as opposed to incarcerating a person that has a drug addiction problem. You try to get them help. And I think that is a wonderful program. I think it probably is something that we should look at expanding, but that has done good things in Syracuse.
Speaking of good things, it's a good thing we're live, because you can get a question in for Ann Magnarelli. She's a candidate for Syracuse CIty Court. I didn't know you were Bill's daughter, so what I didn't read that. I guess I missed that. But anyway, Ann is but she's running on her own, and she's told us about her extensive background in various levels of government. And if you have a question for Ann, she's trying to represent you. So hop on Facebook Live, type your question in, and we hope to get your questions answered. So I asked you before we sat down if you had if you could talk about the what do you call it, the hearings, the Kavanaugh hearings, and you were like, I don't think so. So there's some things I'm not really supposed to ask you about, or you're not supposed to talk about. Why is that?
Well, as judges or as judicial candidates, we're subject to certain judicial ethical standards and rules, which I think is a good thing.
Right.
Judges are supposed to be impartial. That's their role. So we are not allowed to speak about certain topics or make any pledges or promises, and we certainly can't talk about anything that would come in front of that has the potential to come in front of our courtroom. And I can't discuss anything about a specific case or how I would rule on any certain things. We're ethically prohibited from that.
So that's why. And so one of the things that occurred to me was when you were describing all of the different things that come into city court, are those things, you could see any of or all of those things aside from the specialty courts on any given day?
The way that it works, you're rotated through. Okay. Right now there's 9 city court judges. There are, I think I'm correct on this, don't quote me, but I think there's 3 judges right now that handle the specialty courts. The rest of the judges rotate on weekly basis. So one week you'll be doing arraignments, and another week you'll be doing landlord-tenant court.
How many seats up?
There's one.
There's
one.
All right. It's a big deal, right?
Yes, it is. And this doesn't happen very often. Judge Uplinger is retiring, so it is a completely wide open seat.
You had a close race.
I did.
What was that like, counting those votes?
You know, I mean, it was a tense evening. But I was obviously very happy with the outcome. And, you know, I congratulate Shadia Tadros and Felicia Davis. They ran great campaigns, and you know, when you have an open race like this, you expect people to come and try to run for the position. And I think it's great that we had 3 strong women running for this position. And
I know that must have been the relief when the final votes were counted. But
sure,
sweating bullets on election night, I'm sure. All right, let's talk about some things that you can talk about, sure. Right? What do you believe is the root causes for the high numbers of juvenile offenders?
Well, I think specifically if we're talking about Syracuse.
Yeah, Syracuse.
You know, I worked for the city of Syracuse I grew up here. I worked for the city of Syracuse for many years. And I think we have a huge problem of income inequality. I don't think that anyone can deny that there is a portion of haves and have-nots in this city. And when you have economically depressed areas, you're going to have increased crime. You know, I think that is one of the major reasons for juvenile offenders. And I think it's interesting that we are here talking today because today was the day that Raise the Age started. October 1st.
What does that mean?
So in New York State, they passed Raise the Age. So starting today, 16-year-olds will no longer be tried in criminal court. They will go to family court instead if they're arrested for misdemeanors or nonviolent felony offenses. And I think this was a great thing that New York State finally passed this legislation. So 16-year-olds will no longer be going to criminal court, and next October, 17-year-olds will no longer be going in criminal court. They'll be diverted to family court, where they can get a lot more services to, again, try and deal with the root causes of why people are turning to certain petty crimes.
What effect do you think that's going to have on reducing the load, reducing the number of juvenile offenders? A good effect, you think?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely believe that that will have a good effect on our community at large. Number one, I think that people that are diverted to the family court system as opposed to the criminal system will have a lot more opportunities available to them to get into diversion programs, get the help that they need, get social services that they need that are not available in criminal court. So I think that is a great thing. And yes.
And if you're watching us now, some of you are joining us in. Hello, how are you? We are talking with Ann Magnarelli, candidate for Syracuse City Court. This is, of course, the United Democrats of Onondaga County. I'm George Kilpatrick, and Ann is answering my questions, but she'd love to answer yours too. And what do you think is one of the greatest obstacles to justice, if any?
I think specifically when I'm talking about city court, a lot of the times you have individuals that are coming in without attorneys. On the criminal side, obviously, if you don't have an attorney, one will be appointed to you. But in small claims, landlord-tenant court, you're not entitled to one. These are civil matters. So people come in and they don't understand the process. They don't know the process. And an attorney, I think, is vital. But I think that's where city court judges can play a huge role. You have individuals that are coming in, they've never been in a court setting before, they don't understand the process. I think city court judges have a great opportunity to take their time and walk individuals through the process. Now, I understand I have to follow the rule of law. I have to take every case based on the facts that come before me. But what I think I can do, and what I think a lot of the city court judges try to do, is to just explain the process. They may not like the outcome, they may not like what happens, but as long as they understand why what's happening is happening, that is a huge part to making people buy into the justice system and improve it overall.
You mentioned earlier about bail.
Sure.
You get to determine that.
Yes.
How is bail fair, or how do you deal with the inequities or perceived inequities in bail?
I think that there are probably some inequities when we're talking about how bail is imposed. Bail, I believe, should not be used punitively. The purpose of bail is to ensure that a criminal, an alleged criminal, comes back to court. Should not be used as punishment. And I think sometimes, whether it's perceived or real, I think that there are times when, bail is used in a way that can be considered punitive. And if I'm elected to the bench, I would take every case and look at it individually. I think it's important that when you're setting bail, you don't look at the offense. You're not supposed to look at the underlying offense. You're supposed to look at what's going to get them to come back. So, do they have a job?
Those are some of the factors.
Some of the factors you consider. Do they have a job? Do they have children at home that they're going to have child care issues if they are, unfortunately put in jail until their trial? What is their income? The only times you're really considering the underlying offense is when you're talking about certain domestic violence offenses. If there's a risk that the individual may go out and harm another person.
Safety first, right?
Yes.
How about this? If you become aware of an unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate or a case in which you were presiding over, how would you handle it?
I would, first and foremost, I would talk to the attorney. I would take them aside and ask them, what's going on. If there's another explanation for the behavior, I'd like to know. And then there are reporting mechanisms for that. And I would not have a problem reporting that kind of activity.
and this is maybe a question you can't answer, but it just occurred to me. If you see someone not being represented properly, is that something what could you do about that, if anything, or do you have a right to say something or do something?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yes. If you're sitting up there on the bench and you see for example, if you see a defense attorney who is not adequately representing their client or is missing something, they just, maybe they're a new attorney and they're just not seeing it. You absolutely can advise them. You can speak up. You can ask questions. The judges can absolutely ask questions of the parties that come in front of them. So in that way, you can guide them.
Good. I guess if you were the person responsible for deciding what cases would be tried and in what order, how would you split the court's time between the criminal calendar and the civil calendar?
That's a tough question. Obviously, I think when we're talking about the fact that there is both criminal and civil cases in city court, safety first. I think when you're dealing with individuals that can harm other people, when there's victims of crimes, you need to make sure that people are safe. So you need to prioritize those cases. But then on the other side, you're dealing with code violations.
Right.
And some of those can have serious safety repercussions. So you'd have to prioritize those cases as well. It is a high volume court. I think that is probably one of the toughest challenges for city court judges is balancing how much time they spend on each of those cases.
And you've had some experience in various aspects of law review. Once again, you talked earlier in the beginning, but for the new viewers, I just want to bring them up to date. You've had some experience in what areas of law?
I've had experience in both criminal and in civil cases. I spent the majority of my time at the city of Syracuse was civil work. But both of my clerkships I did exclusively in federal court. I did exclusively criminal work, and in my work for the appellate division, I did a lot of criminal work there as well. And when you're working for judges, you're on the other side of the bench. So I had the opportunity to see how they ran their courtrooms, how they handled their caseloads, and how they interacted with everyone that came into their courtrooms. So I had a great opportunity to see it from that vantage point. And they all ran their courtrooms differently. And I think I can take the good and the bad and decide how I want to run my courtroom.
Speaking of which, what do you think is the reason for higher rates of incarceration amongst certain populations, particularly minority populations? Why do you think, or people of color, why do you think there are higher rates of incarceration?
Well, I think that also goes back again to the income inequality that we see here in Syracuse. I think that no one can deny that there are higher rates of incarceration in minority populations. I think that the justice system for a long time has, if you have money and you have a good attorney, you're going to get better representation. And I think that's a problem with our justice system at this point that does need to be fixed somehow. That's for the legislature to decide. Right. But all I can do, and what I would do if I'm lucky enough to be elected, I would treat everyone with dignity and respect, treat every case individually, and never come in with any kind of preconceived notions of how I would decide a case.
So you live in a city, and certainly a couple of weeks ago we had what many would perceive to be a horrific crime where a number of young people gathered were fired upon. And so there's a concern, obviously, about youth violence. What do you think is the appropriate role for the judiciary in addressing this as a perceived issue in our community?
I think that judges, first and foremost, again, have to follow the law, but I think there's always room for compassion. And I think that we need to look more into having diversion programs. Incarceration is not always the answer. There are other ways to solve these problems. You can divert into other programs where they can get social services and help that they need. And I think that that's something that the judicial system is trying to grapple with and trying to find partners in the community to work on those issues.
We got a lot covered here. And I guess we should talk about what do you like to do when you're not working, when you're not running all these different courts that you've been talking about, working for the different levels of government is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I have a 4 and an 8-year-old, and they keep me pretty darn busy. They make me laugh every single day. We do a lot of fun things together. We just, this past weekend, we go to the parks, we go to the zoos. I get to do all those kid things again with them, which is just fantastic. But, it's been great running this campaign and having my 2 kids watch me. I'm really proud that I can show them, that they can be and do anything. So it's been great.
Are there people in law that you admire or that you look up to, either in this community or nationally?
Sure, I can speak to that. I can think of 2 people right off the top of my head. My mentor from day one when I worked at the city of Syracuse was Judge Mary Ann Doherty. She taught me a lot of wonderful things. She's become a very good friend of mine. I would love to be elected so I can go serve with her again. She's a very smart woman, and I admire her greatly. And I also, who doesn't love Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
The notorious RBG.
Yes.
And I guess I should ask you, what's on your iPod? What do you listen to?
Unfortunately, I got a lot of kids, Bob. My daughter has taken it over. Unfortunately.
And do you have a favorite show on Netflix or anything like that? Do you binge watch anything?
Oh God, I can't think of the last time that I've watched a full show. That's really horrible.
No, it's not. It's real life. That there are people who are not binge watching a show, so that's all right. All right. Lastly, one more time, tell the voters why you think you should be the next city court judge.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you again having me on your show tonight. Running for city court judge. I believe that I have the experience to do this job. I have on-the-job training. I've clerked for 2 different courts in my time. I live here. I work here. I am committed to this community. And I have the experience and the judgment to do this job well. And I hope I can get all of your support come November 6th. Please go out and vote.
And that's what we're going to ask people to go out and vote and make your voices heard, especially this year.
Yes.
We need you. We really do. All right, that's it for us. Ann Magnarelli, a candidate for City Court Judge. Remember to vote on November 6th. And you have to be registered by, what's that date? October the 12th. So if you aren't registered, October the 12th is your last chance to be registered. And there are a lot of people all over this community that are canvassing communities. They're out on the corners on Saturdays and Sundays. There's a real push in this community to get people registered. So if you know someone who isn't registered, and if they're a felon, by the way, there's still opportunities for people who are recently released, who may still be eligible to vote. Governor Cuomo has pardoned some people, so there's a lot of opportunity. I'm mentioning all of the opportunities that we need everybody that we can to get to the polls and vote on November the 6th. Again, Ann Magnarelli, candidate for City Court Judge. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
And good luck to you.
Thank you.